All right, guys. Our next guest is the head strength and conditioning coach at American Top Team Florida, a former competitive powerlifter, bodybuilder, strongman, MMA fighter, Division I football player from the Alabama State University. He's also the man behind Daru Strength Specialized Training Systems and the man behind Dustin Poirier's Strength and Conditioning as he gets ready to take on Khabib Nurmagomedov this weekend at UFC 242. Phil Daru, welcome to Submission Radio. How are you today, man?
I'm good. I'm getting ready for a hurricane, guys. So bear with me here. Thanks for having me on. We got a lot of things up and coming, and also I got to deal with a little bit of Mother Nature. But it's a good time.
How does sorry to cut in, Dennis? How does one prepare for a hurricane? Are you battening down the hatches? What are you doing?
Yeah. So we had to have gyms. I have a gym that I own up north, and then also my house. So we had to lock down and make sure that all the windows were taken care of. So putting up shutters and doing things like that. Now I'm thinking more along the lines of flooding. So I was thinking about going and getting some sandbags, but hopefully we don't get as much flooding on my end where I'm at. But you never know. You know what I mean? With these types of things, hurricanes are very unpredictable in a way. So we've been really preparing for about 2 to 3 days now, and the storm is going really, really slow. So we don't know what's going to happen, but just trying to prepare as much as we can.
Man, we really hope everything works out in our hearts with everybody in the area. We won't hold you too long because we don't want to delay the sandbag process if it's necessary. But first things first, we were wondering, what was it that made you want to transition from MMA fighter into a strength and conditioning coach? What sort of brought you to American Top Team? Because obviously Casper read your credentials off the top. I mean, an amazing career as an athlete. It's a good transition and an interesting one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've always looked at it as that was going to be the end goal, was to be a strength and conditioning coach or some sort of coach, whatever sport I decided to do. I've always loved weight training. I've done it since I was, 13, 14 years old. I've always loved getting stronger, getting more powerful, improving my performance for whatever given sport I was doing. So it wasn't really a big transition. It was more just me coasting along and actually getting into the things that I knew that were going to take me to the next level from my career standpoint. When I started doing MMA, it was primarily just because I wanted to stay competing. This was after football, playing in college. I got a hold of Dean Thomas, and he had a school, American Top Team affiliate school in Port St. Lucie. You guys know who Dean Thomas is.
Of course.
I assume by now, right? So he was my first coach. So what we did was I just went up to him and asked him, I want to start training. I want to start competing. And, told me to come in and try out a class, and I loved it. I took to it very well. I was a good athlete. I was an undefeated amateur, doing really well there. But at the same time, I was also helped training my teammates and myself doing strength and conditioning. So I was finding ways to actually train these types of individuals as a fighter myself. And I was probably around the age of 20, 21 years old, where I got to really understand the energy systems that go into it, the proper protocols that you need, especially when it comes down to understanding and programming, and also making sure that the schedules match whatever we're trying to do so we don't clash as far as energy systems goes, and we don't get over fatigued. So learning those processes and understanding the science behind, obviously, strength and conditioning or whatever you want to call it, physical preparation, I decided to take what I know from that perspective and then also rely on, my overall experience in the fight game to merge the two or bridge the gap of science and practicality. And that's what we've been doing so far. So it was an easier transition than most. And honestly, I feel like this is my place in this sport, in this industry. And hopefully we're doing well so far.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's always great when people sort of, find their niche and find their specialty. Also, it's fascinating to see how strength and conditioning has sort of evolved in MMA when you look at guys back in the day, and it was all about who can be the biggest and who can be the strongest. And, I feel like the training, other than the technique training, was pretty basic, like a lot of squats, a lot of deadlifts, just more hypertrophy and like strength training, to now where it's so much more about, just balance and explosive training. So I guess as a coach, what would you say is your philosophy when it comes to strength and conditioning in MMA? And what would you say is one of the biggest things that you felt was missing in MMA when it came to strength and conditioning, before you came in?
I mean, the biggest thing is making sure that you can balance out the energy demands and making sure that you are mitigating fatigue and reducing injury. alongside increasing performance. And that's kind of general in nature. Like that's with any sport. But with this one, we have to be very cognizant of what they're doing on a daily basis, because they're training a lot more than your average sport, practitioner, or, let's say, for instance, a football player, or, a soccer or a basketball player, something along the lines of that. For you guys, it would be like, even like footy, you guys got that out there. I know a lot of it, there's so many demands that go into just a specific MMA sport. Is, they have to do their jiu-jitsu, they have to do their boxing, their kickboxing, and then you have to put all this into play and then try to fit in some strength and conditioning on top of that. So understanding it from that perspective and knowing the schedule and having constant communication with coaches are very important to get overall performance, but also making sure that we are reducing injury, or at least mitigating the risk of injury, and also we're bringing down that fatigue factor. Because a lot of times, and what was the issue was that fighters were kind of running themselves into the ground. They were getting to the fight, but they were over fatigued, they were overtrained, and they ended up getting injuries, and non-contact injuries at that. And we don't need that, especially in this sport where there's a lot of contact. So at that point, you want to make sure that they have a structural balance. We're making sure that they are structurally sound as far as movement quality, and making sure that their bone structure is ready to take blows. On top of that, we have to increase, sport performance. So speed, strength, power, things of that nature. And understanding that in a systematic fashion is going to help them evolve and get better, especially on the level that I'm at now, training some of the elite level fighters. A lot of those guys don't really need a whole lot of skills training anymore. They need to make sure that their body is physically ready to do the sport. So with that being said, my role as a strength and conditioning coach at that level has become highly important for these individuals, because we're talking about longevity. If you can stay in the sport long enough, you're going to be good. So at the end of the day, I'm working on that aspect for all my fighters at American Top Team. I have Andre Arlovsky, who's 41 years old, who's been in the game forever, but he's still going. He's still going strong, and he can still fight for, 3 to 5 more years if he really wanted to, because of the fact that he's put now a level of hierarchy of importance on his strength and his overall conditioning and his structural integrity and balance, and overall mobility of joints, so that he can stay in the game and do what he loves to do, and still make it happen.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about Dustin as he heads into this fight with Khabib this weekend. Tell us, when did you start working with him, and sort of what kind of, I suppose, shape and level was he at when it came to strength and conditioning when you first started working with him?
Yeah, I've been working with Dustin for about 4 years now. It's our 6th camp together. We actually started right after Michael Johnson. So he lost that Michael Johnson fight, and then from there we started rolling. He found that he needed something different. He needed something that was going to help his overall strength and his quality of life. And honestly, his conditioning has always been on point. His VO2 max is up in the 60s. His resting heart rate right now, before he left, was about 34 beats per minute.
Wow.
So that's very good. Yeah. So, I'm very happy with his level of conditioning, his level of aerobic capacity. He's always had that, but I think we've upped it a notch, just for the simple fact of training, appropriately, and doing it the right ways, and doing it so that he can still evolve and get stronger and get faster, but still maintain his aerobic capacity. So we've worked on that. As far as him in the strength area, I'm not going to say he was the strongest guy in the room. He definitely needed work on that. But again, he's never lifted weights. He's always fought. That's all he really knows. He's never played a sport in his life. All he knows is fighting. So at the end of the day, he didn't know how to weight train, so he never did it. So when we found out, I just obviously slowly progressed him in a linear fashion. And then from there, once he developed that structural balance and stability, then from there we started to load him appropriately to let strength take over. And then from there, that will improve on his power output just from physics in general. So what we tried to do each and every camp is find out, okay, what do we need to improve upon from his standpoint? And then we need to work on the weaknesses of his opponent and basically counter that. So again, we want to make sure for this fight, obviously Khabib is going to try to take him down, and that's his game, and that's what we try to do. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is to make sure that he has his abilities as an athlete. So power endurance is going to be key, having the ability to strike and be powerful for a long duration, and also making sure that he's strong in the clinch, making sure that he has strong hips, strong posterior chain, making sure that if he does get taken down, we can get back up and not stay down there and stay pinned down there. The thing that I know about Khabib is that He's very technical. You know, a lot of people think that he's super strong, but from what Edson Barbosa says and a couple of guys that we know that has trained with him in the past, it's not really his strength that's the issue. It's his overall technique and his ability to transition and knowing these positions to keep you down. He just nullifies any type of movement that you may want to do. So the goal really is to make sure that we are one step ahead. So we need to counter his counter and be playing it almost like a chess match. With that being said, that comes from the game planning. That goes with, Mike Brown and Daya and what they do with him. For me, I'm just giving him the physical attributes to make sure that we can take that and be technical and be skillful when the time comes.
I was going to say, just purely from a physical standpoint, what would you say is most impressive about Khabib and most difficult to deal with in a fight? Just when you look at sort of, the physical traits that he brings to a fight.
I mean, again, it's him having the ability to stay heavy, and it keeps his hips heavy. A lot of that may, again, like I said, not be a physical attribute, but that's also technique. And technique does play a huge role in everything. So with that, we want to make sure that, again, we can nullify that through our specific techniques to, get up and do what we do best, which is obviously put hands on people. But for him, man, I know for a fact, and I know I trained some of actually Khabib's cousins that actually train at American Top Team.
Oh, wow.
They all tell me that from the jump, I mean, they learn technique each and every day, and that's what they do in Dagestan. They grapple, they wrestle, and they know how to get a hold of somebody, and they know how to keep them down. So I would say that's the most impressive part, is that he has the ability to just nullify any type of movement that an athlete wants to do, and making sure that they stay down. And then from there, people get frustrated, and that's the main thing that we cannot do, is get frustrated and leave openings to the point where he capitalizes on them.
You got to think that this may end up being a pretty grueling fight, like you mentioned. And when it comes to cardio, there's anaerobic cardio, your heart and your lungs, and then there's muscle endurance and fatigue, which is often we see comes into play when someone gets out wrestled. Which one would you say is most important against Khabib going into this fight this weekend?
All of it, to be honest with you. You have to have a large aerobic base to make sure that all these other energy systems are trained appropriately and have the ability to reproduce energy. So if you don't have a large aerobic capacity, it's going to be very hard for you to reproduce ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is your body's natural energy source. But at the end of the day, also muscular endurance is definitely going to play a huge role. So has his ability to be strong for a long duration and, be tight in tight situations, making sure that he's able to buffer that lactic acid out of the muscle so that he can still produce those energies and those outputs at a faster and higher rate than Khabib. So that's going to be the true test. And honestly, it's very hard to do that in an 8-week camp or whatever we had. I think we had about 10 weeks in total to really develop that. But it also comes down to getting in the wrestling room and really putting in the miles on that wrestling and takedown defense, because that's really where you're going to get true specificity of conditioning. And when it comes down to that particular aspect of the game. So, we've done a lot of that. And people think, they watch my YouTube channel and they'll look at my videos and like, oh, you should be wrestling. I'm like, do you really think that we're not wrestling right now? Do you really think that we're not in the wrestling room really putting in the hours? Honestly, Dustin got almost fed up with the amount of wrestling that he had to do because of the fact that it is a fight and he's a true fighter. So he wants to stand up and bang. But the goal really is honestly having to take down or stop that takedown. So, I mean, we drilled it over and over and over again to the point where he almost got sick of it. You know what I mean? Now, that's not to say that we weren't ready, and what we wanted to do was to be the best at what we need to be come fight night. But again, it is frustrating when that's the only aspect of the guy's game that's going to be a true test for him. So it's not the most fun thing to do. It's not the most interesting. It's not something that he likes to do, but he knew he had to do it. And at that point, we got really, really, really good at it, because of the fact that we're doing it over and over and over again every day, 2 times a day, on top of the fact that he's doing his strength work and his overall conditioning. I mean, I don't see it being an issue at all. If it does, it's because of the fact that, Khabib is just a high-level wrestler or a high-level grappler, and he just knows how to do those things. But at the end of the day, I really think that if anybody can beat this guy, is Dustin Poirier.
I'm curious to sort of hear like what it is specifically that you feel Dustin brings to the table based on what you see sort of, from your perspective, some of the dangers. And also I wonder, like, when it comes to the mental sort of aspect, how do you balance, like, sometimes people think, okay, to prepare for Khabib, you work on takedown defense again and again and again and again. But then also at the same time, you gotta sort of some fighters seem to fall into that defensive mentality against Khabib, and almost they don't get their offense out. And that's, I guess, the important part of it, where Dustin has to sort of be mentally ready to just go in there and implement his game plan as opposed to just defending Khabib's, right?
Yeah, no, he kind of said this in the past, and they asked him the same question. I think it does take a special type of crazy, a certain type of individual, a fighter at heart, somebody who's going to get in there and put it all on the line no matter what. And when he does get hit, or if he does get taken down, he knows when the fight's going on. I'm not ever as confident as I am with a certain individual like Dustin Poirier as I am with anybody else. I think with him, primarily, I'm never not confident in his ability to actually go out there and fight and put it on the line. Anybody else I may, and I have a lot of fighters. I have 85 fighters in camp.
Wow.
There's some individuals that I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if things get tough, how well this is going to, stop him mentally, not physically, but mentally. And Dustin Poirier, I never really have that thought in my head. When he fought Max, I was like, okay, he's going to pull it through. When he fought Justin Gaethje, I knew that it was going to be a tough fight. But if it came down to it, I know that Dustin can weather the storm and do what he does best. So when that comes, we really get to see the true person that Dustin Poirier is. Again, you guys know, the background, his history now. It's been, obviously broadcasted. He has the, if you look at Fightville, if you look at his upbringing, the kid's been through it all. You know what I mean? And now looking at it, I hope people can really understand that this isn't going to be as easy as people think it's going to be, because of how well he's fully prepared mentally and physically, but just the entire fact of him just going through what he's gone through. Yeah, I know that Khabib has been through some stuff too. Trust me, Dagestanians are very hard people, and they're very tough individuals. But don't disregard a little, nobody kid from the backwoods of Louisiana that will really put it all on the line when the time comes. And I'm truly ready and excited to see him shock the world.
Yeah, I also want to get your perspective, because we're doing this UFC 242 preview show, sort of analyzing the fights, breaking it down. A lot of it dedicating to sort of, what Dustin can do in this fight. But as a former fighter yourself, what do you think is the key to beating Khabib? Obviously, no one's been able to do it thus far. I'm wondering what your perspective is. As a former fighter, I imagine you see certain, holes in Khabib's game plan, game. Everybody has them, and things that can be exploited. What do you think some of those are?
Yeah, making him work harder than he usually does is going to be the key factor. So making sure that he, doesn't get those takedowns as easily as he usually does, giving him looks and cracking him with shots to make sure that he second guesses those particular shots that he's going to try to attempt. I've seen things with Ally Quinta when he got hit. There were certain times in that fight where he looked uneasy, where he looked like, okay, what do I do now? Even with Edson, we've talked, I train Edson Barbosa. We talked about things with that when he was getting frustrated with the point of, he couldn't take somebody down. And at the end of the day, doing all those takedowns or going for all those attempts, if you miss some of those attempts, those are very physically draining. So the goal really is to make sure that we're moving around, we're stopping some shots, we're stopping the takedowns. And even if we do get taken down, we're getting right back up. We're not staying down there. And then we're hitting him with good shots that are going to rock him and make him think about shooting in again on that particular angle. From there, once you start to develop that rhythm and that pattern of movement and overall striking, he then begins to take shots that are unorthodox and may not be as technical as usual. And then from there, it leaves him open to a bigger shot, which can ultimately put him away or open him up for a submission, because he's trying to get the takedown through any means necessary. So the goal really is to make sure in the beginning of the fight we stay dynamic, we stay moving well, we're creating angles, we're popping the jab out there, staying low. And if he does shoot and he misses, we stop the takedown. If he does get the takedown, we're right back up off our feet, and we make him pay for it as we get up, hit him with a couple of shots, or hit him while he comes in on the takedown. Even if he does get it, he's going to take some damage while he does. Then from there, we want to make sure that we're dragging out the fight as much as we can, because we can rely on our recoverability just from the simple fact of how conditioned he really is in. And from there, we're hoping and we're seeing that maybe Khabib can get a little bit more exhausted than he usually does, and he can leave an opening up for either, a hard left, a hard right, knee, a guillotine, whatever comes, and we're going to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And obviously this fight's happening on the other side of the world, Phil. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on fighting over in a place, with a different time zone? Obviously, the guys are going to be fighting in extreme heat. There's a lot of different theories on when people should go over so their bodies can acclimate to it, so their conditioning can remain the same. What are your theories on it, and what was Dustin's approach to going all the way over there and dealing with these kinds of conditions?
Yeah, it's a 9-hour difference. So he left 9 days from the fight. And what he's been told that, 9 hours or every hour for every, or I should say every day for every hour that you are missing. So he went 9 days out. I feel like that's a good amount of time to get acclimated to the situation there and the circumstances that he'll be actually put in. As far as the heat goes, we're used to the heat. We're in Florida, obviously, and he's in Louisiana. So that's not a big issue. I know that Abu Dhabi is a whole different type of heat, but we're inside too as well. So, and actually all of his training is pretty much done. All he's doing right now is drilling and making sure that he's tactically sound. So with that being said, I think that that's not going to play a big role. I like to see him usually leave around 10 days out. So 9 days wasn't a big issue. 10 days to really fully get out there and feel the process of what goes on out there and getting acclimated to the surroundings is going to be a key. But it's always going to be different no matter what. If you're going across the world and you have to fight in different circumstances of what you're used to, but you have to overcome that as a true fighter. You have to take those, those hardships, if you would call it, and overcome them. And like, again, if I'm more confident, it's going to be Dustin Poirier that understands that factor and takes full advantage of that. So I'm happy to see it.
There's a lot of fascinating things about this fight. Obviously, Dustin's pressure, Khabib's pressure. It's kind of like, two forces colliding. Also, the fact that Dustin kind of likes to fight in close range. Yeah. And also Khabib, kind of wants to be in close range as well to sort of get that takedown. How do you sort of get around something like that? I imagine that's going to be kind of a hurdle, that something that Dustin's going to have to figure out in that fight.
Yeah, keeping the distance is obviously going to be important. We want to make sure that we're using our boxing to keep the distance, using our kicks, keeping them off balance a little bit, using those low kicks and things like that to keep them off balance, but not to give away too many things. I would say that at the most part, we're just going to try to do our game the way we should for this particular fight, and keep it the same, but also alter it, based upon Khabib's situations of what he gives us, so I think at the end of the day, man, I think that, it's all a fight and anything can happen, especially with those little gloves. And if you get popped with a Dustin Poirier shot, you're going to get wobbly and you're going to go down. So hopefully we get to see that. And I'm excited again, like I said, to actually see it unfold and watch him shock the world, man. Because honestly, I'm getting a lot of messages, DMs and emails and comments on YouTube about how he's going to smash my boy and how he's going to maul him and all this and that. It's very funny to me to actually discredit what Dustin has done in the past 6 fights and in his entire career, to truly just write him off like he's a nobody, which is very funny to me. And I'm happy to see what may happen and what may unfold. And honestly, no matter what, I know that without anything, win or lose, Dustin's gonna give me the absolute most effort possible, and that's in anybody. He's gonna give you guys a true fight. He's going to put maximal effort into every shot. He's going to put maximal effort into every takedown defense, every shot blocked. He's going to make sure that he does what he needs to do to the 110th degree to make sure that, it's not as easy as people think.
I really appreciate the time, Phil. We'll let you go in just a moment. This is kind of a broad question. I always wondered, like, when it comes to knockout power, it's almost like the secret sauce. Like, you get guys like, say, Mike Tyson, who are short and stocky, thick. They got massive legs. You can understand where that knockout power comes from. Then you got guys like Anderson Silva, who are super, super skinny. They're not physical specimens, but they're so precise, and they knock people out. From a strength and conditioning standpoint and an MMA fighter standpoint, do you think knockout power is something you can teach? If you put technique aside, if you have a guy who has perfect technique but he has no knockout power, is that something you can improve through strength and conditioning? What do you think are sort of the most necessary physical traits if you want knockout power?
That's the big debate. And a lot of people say that you cannot really create knockout power. It's God-given. It's genetics and this and that. I do believe that you can increase your power production. Obviously, that's just basic physics, understanding how to get stronger and then use that force that you've gained and produce that force at a faster rate. Now, using the particular movements and methods that I use when you're talking about ballistics and plyometrics, this can help with overall power. Now, can it give you knockout power? Maybe, maybe not. We don't really know. There hasn't been enough studies to actually prove that. But what I can say is that you can improve on the force that you put out when it comes down to overall striking, whether it be a punch or a kick. And then you can obviously increase your strength output. So whether it be a true knockout, because a lot of things come into play with that. That's precision, that's timing, that's overall technique, that's skill. But also it comes down to being able to create torque and be able to create that power and that energy through those shots, being able to be relaxed, overcome by dynamic, and be static, overcome by dynamic. So having that ability to produce force at a faster rate, what we call rate of force production, we can increase that. Now, is it going to help them be knockout artists? Again, I don't know, But what I can say is that from a physical preparation standpoint, I'm going to give them the tools that they need from my perspective to help that happen. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, we still can increase power through shots that can create damage that will ultimately help them win the fight.
And what we're talking about, giving people an advantage and helping them out, I've always been curious about this, Phil, so I just wonder if you have a theory on it as well. What about being able to take a shot and reducing the likability of being hurt and concussed? I know a lot of fighters sort of switched up some of their training, and apparently it's helped them a little bit. They feel like if they build a little bit more muscle around their head, if they get a bit more strength, they can take that shot a little bit better. What are your theories around that?
Well, it's not really a theory. It's a known fact right there that there has been literature and studies proven that if you do increase neck strength and overall girth of the neck and trap area, it will reduce the risk of concussions. And honestly, and I say this very seldomly, reduce is a very loose word, right? Because at the end of the day, I had 8 concussions playing football.
Wow.
Right? And my neck isn't that small, by the way,
Yeah.
But again, forces collide, and football is a whole different, we're talking American football, right? When two forces collide, right? And it's like a cue ball effect where you basically there's no deformation. You basically collide and you retract this kinetic energy that happens there. So when that happens, you're going to have some damage done because of the fact that your brain's getting rattled around your skull. Now, can we reduce it from a punch, from a kick? Yeah, because the forces aren't as much, right? Again, if you're taking an Edson Barbosa shot, I don't care how much network you do, that's going to hurt, and you are going to get knocked out, right? But at the end of the day, when you're talking about just being able to take shots appropriately, increasing the neck strength and overall girth and size of the neck in general will reduce it. It won't, take it away completely. That makes sense. Now, genetically, I have seen that guys can take shots a lot more efficiently. You're looking at guys that, that really never had any head trauma before as a young kid, getting up into the fight game. They really only take headshots when they're in practice, if not any, and then they take the headshots inside the octagon or inside the cage when they're fighting. But that's the only time they've ever taken a shot. So you can reduce that, and have that ability to not have that, to not get knocked out through not taking damage, accumulation of damage throughout your entire career and throughout your life. So I would say try to reduce the risk of getting hit in the head in practice, which will give you more longevity and will help you with bringing down that overall ability to get knocked out.
Fascinating stuff here from Phil, and of course we'll let you go in just a second. We're going to get a couple of predictions from you before we go, Phil. First of all, if Dustin does do it this weekend, I mean, it's obvious that the UFC is going to try and do this rematch between him and Conor McGregor. It would be the money fight to make. A lot of people saw what happened between Dustin and Conor the first time out. I'm just wondering, from where Dustin is now, a lot of people sort of see him as a completely different fighter to the guy that fought Conor McGregor the first time. If these guys did have a rematch, do you see the fight going a whole lot differently from that first time they met?
Yeah, I mean, Dustin was a young kid when he fought Conor the first time. Conor got in his head, and Dustin has said this before in past interviews, and he really made him do things that he really wasn't supposed to do in that fight, and not stick to the game plan. And he got a lucky shot off. I mean, he hit him in the back of the ear, and, that's good. And Conor has good precision striking. In my opinion, I think that his boxing is pretty good as far as that goes. I think Dustin's is actually better now, from where he's at, at this point in time in his career. If the fight does take place again, I do see Dustin very easily winning that fight. And I'm not just saying that being biased, because he's my guy, but at the end of the day, like, if you look at it, Conor hasn't really won a fight in a long time. On top of the fact that I don't think Conor's really training like that anymore. At the end of the day, he's doing his own thing. Now, I'm not saying that Conor is not a phenomenal athlete or phenomenal fighter, because he is, and what he's got going on, and he's got money in the bank. He doesn't probably even need to fight. But if it does happen, I do see my guy actually winning that fight, just for the fact that we've been more active, we've been more successful, we've grown, we've evolved. Especially when it comes down to the striking. If you look at it from back when he fought Conor to now, it's totally different. It's totally, it's light years ahead. Dia Davis has done a phenomenal job at improving his boxing, and he has the ability now to do things different or even better than what he could do in the past fight that he had with Conor. So I am interested. If it does happen, I am really confident in the different outcome that will occur if he does fight.
I think the hunger of Dustin Poirier is also something that's undeniable at this point. As we let you go, Phil, obviously the prediction for this fight, UFC 242, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. How do you see your boy getting it done against Khabib this coming weekend?
Okay, so this is funny because this was a big thing on Twitter recently that I said that he was gonna get Khabib tired in the fourth and take him out in the fourth round. But let me reiterate why I say this. Right, we're going to try to make sure that he pays for those takedowns every time he does. We're going to get up, make things hard for him, make him have to work for the takedown. That's physically exhausting when you do that. So with that perspective, we have the ability to recover between rounds. He can drop his heart rate 40% within 1 minute. So basically meaning if he gets his heart rate to about sub-maximal, or I should say right before the lactic threshold, sitting at around 85%, which is where he is usually when he's doing some hard sparring, which is kind of, I'm not going to say it's fully similar to a fight, but it is right there. His heart rate, he can drop that down to roughly around 120, even in the 119, 118, and that's going to give him a huge advantage when it comes down to being ready to do what he needs to do come the next round. So with that being said, I know for a fact that wrestling is very physically taxing. If you do not get those takedowns as fluent as possible, where there is some pushback, like Dustin's going to give him, you're going to get tired, no matter who you are. Don't get me wrong, Khabib is a phenomenal athlete, a phenomenal grappler, and he's one of the best fighters in the world, if not the. But when you go ahead and you stop what he's best at and you make him pay for it, it's going to cause fatigue. So what we are trying to accomplish within the fourth round, because of the fact that it's going to take a little bit of time for him to get tired. I'm not going to say he's going to get tired in the first round. That's not going to happen. It's going to take time. I say the fourth or even the fifth round, we're ready to go. We stop some shots, right? We hit him with some shots. And then from there, he's going to shoot in, maybe somewhat sloppily, right? Or let's say with not the most technique, and then get hit with a shot or get caught in the guillotine. And that's just me thinking out loud, right? I'm just saying what I think. My predictions may not happen. I'm not a Mystic Mac, right? Like McGregor says. But I will say this. I do feel that he has the abilities to put Khabib away. Now, if that doesn't happen, I do see it going all 5 rounds and it going to the decision. That's something that we don't want, especially being someone in his home crowd, But again, it is what it is,
I think those are some of the most fascinating fights, where there's different tides and it goes one way, then it goes another way, and, kind of has you on the edge of your seat. Phil, really appreciate your time, man. Check out the man on Twitter and Instagram at Daru Strong. Of course, you can also go to darustrong.com where you can get online coaching and mentorship from Phil, a whole bunch of options, and, of course, the Daru Strong Training Center where you can train with Phil as well, and, of course, American Top Team Florida. Really appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much for your insight. It was fun chatting with you, man. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. It was fun.
All the best with the Hurricane, man. Hope everything's fine, and we can't wait to speak to you after the fight.
All right, appreciate it, guys.